Welcome, folks, to the latest DRUID Talks. I'd like to introduce you to Laetitia, Managing Director for Accenture. Laetitia leads Accenture's Data and AI business in Europe and is the global lead for conversational AI. She drives innovation, sales, and delivery across the globe, across multiple industries and clients. Laetitia has more than 24 years' experience in the consulting industry, has authored multiple academic publications, and holds patents in the conversational AI domain. Laetitia was the founder of Accenture's Innovation Studio in London, a space where her team co-created with clients to realize the potential of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and IoT. Laetitia is the reserve member of the Artificial High-Level Group at the European Commission and also a board member of OASIS, the Open Foundation in Europe. Welcome, Laetitia.
Thank you, Kieran. Absolutely delighted to be here with you today.
Well, let me jump in and ask lots of questions because I've been waiting for this moment for some time. There's been lots said about chatbots and chatbot technology, intelligent virtual assistants, digital workers, cobots, they're called a lot of different things. That can lead to confusion amongst these technologies. But what do you think is the difference, or what differentiates conversational AI from other chatbot technologies?
Well, thanks for the question. I think that's the very important question, especially for us in Europe. When I started in the conversational AI space, we didn't want to be associated with the word chatbot. And the reason why we didn't want that is in Europe, we were trailblazing a lot of those technology in the early 2000s, and they were not particularly successful. They were quite, the technology cloud didn't exist, AI wasn't there, so they were very scripted and very rigid. And most of all, they were also limited to text. And we didn't want to carry that baggage of an environment which is quite constrained, which is quite rigid. So we thought it was important to actually acknowledge the progress of cloud AI technology, natural language processing, and really kind of embrace something which is much broader. So which is why actually we've been in Accenture one of the first to call this area and this domain conversational AI, really to mark a new step change.
I love that you pioneered that, by the way, as well, because it's very rare that people see a technology right from the very beginning and then bring it all the way through. Your experience must be exceptional on it. Do you believe conversational AI is a special technology amongst emerging tech?
Well, I think what is very special is the possibilities it brings. It does really change the relationship in between human and machine. So let me take you a few years back, we used to have to learn how to code and how to interact with particular machine, and that used to take a long time. I think now with conversational AI, what we do is in natural language we can start interacting with systems, and that changed the complete paradigms on that relationship we have with machine, because we don't need to learn it any longer, it learns us. And I think the possibility around this are actually mind-blowing, around democratization, access, and all of that. So yes, it's a very exciting technology because it brings so much more possibility for all of us professional, but society more generally.
You must have seen tremendous change since you first pioneered that technology. What's the biggest differences between now and 10 years ago? Is it the lack of rigidity? Is it that the technology is, as you mentioned, learning us as opposed to it, or us learning it?
Well, I think it's a number of dimensions. I think obviously starting to have the cloud has been a bit of a game changer for this particular technology. And with the cloud, the ability of storing data and itineracies, and then starting to use AI in some of those systems that were very scripted before. So, I think the paradigm really kind of evolved with those kind of technologies kind of being available and being more accessible. Now, obviously, with the large language model and some of the generative AI, new technology coming up, we're taking another step change into this particular technology and the world of possibility that's becoming even stronger.
I love that phrase, the world of possibility. That's so cool. From your experience, then, the business world has a great number of pains. This technology can potentially help resolve those pains. What have you seen the best businesses doing? How are they using conversational AI to make their businesses much better than before?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, there's two particular angles people have been looking at. Ultimately, conversational AI is a new system of engagement. So we used to have website in the early 2000s, then we had app, and then I think conversational AI is the next kind of level of how we engage with brand. Yeah, so we had a rush for brands to kind of have a website, have an app, have XYZ, and now they want a system of engagement. I think people wanted a system of engagement to improve customer experience, and what has been really difficult in the market is a new system of engagement is typically more expensive to run if you just do it for the customer experience. And I think that's where the industry wrestled a little bit. So there was some great amount of keenness to become multi-channel and all of that kind of things, but at the same time people were conscious this was an additional investment. So the key for us was to find the right use cases or business cases to actually help transform and help found that new way of engaging. I think one of the use cases that's most deployed out there, and I think is not many companies that haven't considered it, is the call center and the customer care element. Because ultimately, when you start digitalizing your customer care using conversational AI technology, you can start have beside the cost saving and solving some of the challenge of having to ramp up agent all the time, people that don't really like the job, and having something quite seasonal as well in your business, like a lot of brands have like a big rush at Christmas and need to hire a lot, and it's quite difficult to ramp up all of those things. So the call center and the customer care, the technology really solves some immediate challenges and really help running operations in a more streamlined way. But what people also realize is by using that technology, they can also digitalize the voice of the customer, and things that were usually in tapes buried under in the background, they could start analyzing what it meant and what customer were really after, what were their challenges and all of that, and really use that to better up their service and potentially review their product and their services as a company. That's where I talk about the back office. The customer care used to be a back office kind of a function. It's really kind of putting it back in the front as the voice of the customer that actually really has a strong touch, which is in strong touch with what's needed and what's not working and what needs to be done, and can really start impacting the backlog of particular brands and their product. Yeah.
Oh, wow. What do you think businesses, Laetitia, want from automation? What do you think they want from conversational AI? Like, do they actually understand the art of all of the possible that you mentioned a moment ago?
I don't think it's quite difficult to make a generalization there, but I think obviously brands are quite complicated. There's marketing department, there's customer care departments, there's technology department, and I think it depends who is driving this particular agenda. I think in the past it was more the technology department or the IT department trying to size understand the technology and the possibilities, and therefore it was maybe a little tactical, in its implementation. Obviously, the power of conversational AI is much more than automating conversation or contact. It's much more. It's much more about reinvention of your brand and its customer relationship. Just to give you a few examples, we had a number of customers that were very keen on automation, but when you start looking at automation of existing script, those scripts very often are very system focused. They were created a long time ago for a company that wanted to go through a particular process. But now we are much more savvy than that as end users. We want to speak in our own term, in our own language. We don't necessarily want to be speaking a system language. So things are like, when you call a particular brand and they're asking you for your order ID, which is that long, or they're asking you for your customer ID rather than, things that you have at hand, or things that can be deduced because, they know about you, and they may need a snippet of information and they should be able to pull up quite a lot. So all of those things are not in the old-fashioned way. And if you automate them with conversational AI, you kind of end up with a very clunky system that nobody wants to use, because it's the same as calling somebody. It's probably even less flexible because it still embody the old ways of thinking or establishing that relationship. The opportunity is huge, though, because you can take the opportunity to reinvent this whole experience and streamline the experience, and then obviously do some automation and use the technology to even make it smoother. And I think if brand miss that opportunity, they typically just create something that's not used, that won't get any return, and then it's not helping the industry, because it's another chatbot that's not working, or that's not nice, or that's another system now. So the transformation element is super important, and it needs to be an opportunity for reinvention and really putting the focus on the human and the customer rather than on the system. Obviously, systems are still there. You need still to collect information, but maybe some of it you can infer, and things like that. You can make it much smoother for the end user.
Yeah. I wonder if anybody ever did a comedy show and they acted as some of the old chatbots and then realized what they were putting in place and then put that in front of an executive team or whatever. I do worry sometimes that the IT team were thrown a tool and said, get on with digital transformation. It's never truly worked. And I love what you said a moment ago around it's actually the back office is coming to the front, the customer insights and bubbling away to the surface of the organization. And then you're redesigning what you've got to create great experiences. That's probably the power of the technology and the design or the use of the tech. You mentioned a couple of things there, Laetitia. You mentioned, back office and front office and brand and customer service and customer experience and bringing together lots of applications. What are the crucial or critical capabilities that a conversational AI platform should have to allow it to help the brand or the business actually meet and possibly exceed their business expectations?
Well, that's a very good question. I think one of the key ingredients is user experience designer, because even the worst technology out there, you can probably do quite a lot if you have an amazing design team. Because ultimately, it's not about the quality of your natural language processor as much. It's about the quality of that interaction. Very often, you know, you need second guess the customer and he would just nod, yes, you got me, or no, you know, like, so actually crafting that user experience is the skills, you know, like we used to have designer for app or for website, you know, crafting a conversations is actually more in the realm of, you know, movie scripting or things like that. You know, how do you craft something that's compelling, interesting, you know, that's fast for the end user because you're in care situation and things like that. And ultimately, if you have done that well, the end user shouldn't have to tell you their whole life story. So the you know, you should be very much in context and, you know, drive the conversation as a conversational AI system, rather than just opening up the world to, you know, the world on his brother. So I think the design is key. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of companies don't get right. And it's not easy because, you know, the designer, it's the left brain and right brain meeting up together, and they just don't necessarily understand each other because we've been segregated as little kids into your right brain bucket and your left brain bucket. But it's really that magic of being able to create the experience with the understanding of what the tech can do. I think really important. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of channel up there. If you WhatsApp, Facebook, you know, Instagram, you name it. I think it's also important to have something which is cross-channel, you know, so you don't necessarily have, you know, a bombshell to maintain all those channels separately with different things. So it's important to have a technology that can, you know, enable various channel and potentially swapping in between each channel, because, you know, we on the move in the train will do something different than if we're at home. If we have a problem on our bill, we probably use a different channel than, you know, if we're in between meetings trying to solve something. So I think that fluidity behind channel is important, and I think the technology needs to have that. Obviously, the natural language needs to be working well. The context, you know, remembering the context is essential, and the fluidity of the conversation. So establishing trust as you kind of go through the experience is important. So people feel like the system got them and they don't feel like they're going in a rabbit hole and say, oh my God, what's going to come out, you know, and start being suspicious about some of the outcome. Obviously, integrating, all brands have a lot of systems in the back, so the integration with the system is also key, because, you know, you can have the best conversational AI system, if it can't do the job, then, you know, of I don't know, canceling your credit card or doing XYZ, then it's just, you know, it's just a little pointless for brands. So so it's a mix, but I think for me is really, I would like to really kind of point the experience element. I think is really essential.
It's interesting. There's a lot in that particular cake mix, as it were. I wonder if we ever listen to our human workers and have the same expectations as we do of technology. I sometimes think when we introduce conversational AI or tech, our expectations are here, but when we're dealing with a person, we're sometimes that little bit more forgiving or understanding. I've never quite understood that. Have you seen a really great example within an industry or within a business who has actually implemented conversational AI or conversational AI experiences that excited you, delighted you, inspired you, challenged the way the business was thinking, come out the other end much better? You don't have to name a company unless you want to, but have you seen that where you're going, that's the gold standard everyone should follow?
Well, I think what I like in conversational AI system is also the learning side. You know, when we used to deliver IT project, you know, you do a lot of hard work and then you go live and then that's it. You obviously in maintenance mode, but when you're in a conversational AI system, there's all that learning of, you know, different ways of expressing an issue or different subtlety on how to deal with the process. So the learning element, I think, is really, really key. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I'm thinking now a few years back, a lot of years back, in the early days, and this is one of the patents we created with my team at the Liquid Studio in London. We wanted to put the telephony system with the Irish Revenue Commissioner at the time. The rationale for them wanting to kind of put a conversational AI system was that it was a new tax that they had created in Ireland, and suddenly this particular tax was impacting the older generation, which were not in their working life any longer, and therefore, much more old-fashioned way of dealing with that particular tax. Because the people were just in retirement, basically, and that particular tax introduction created quite a bit of a volume of queries coming in on phone calls, and we started to create this conversational AI system. And at the time, we had some challenge around the pace of it, because he was on the phone. And, at the time, you had to wait for a pause in the sentence to be able to understand what the person was saying, and then, decide the next step. And that was quite tricky, because we thought that particular pause was too long for the conversation to be interactive. So that's where we created that patent on continuous listening of the conversation, so we could understand on the fly, so we didn't have as much latency into the conversation. And one of the so we were going to go live for 1 week to start capturing all those data and those experiences, and learn how what we needed to adjust and things like that. And then we never switched off the system. But we had daily review, daily learning sessions and things like that. And, one of our biggest success is we had an 85-year-old lady, which was one of the first user of the systems. And she went through and everything got sorted. She got the tax code on whatever she needed. And she was in a special scenario of being disabled. So, in that particular interaction, we solved the problem spot on, because we ask her some question, are you responding to a letter we sent to you, blah, blah, blah. So we were trying to really get under the bonnet who was calling us early, so we could really make it as friendly as possible. We saved a lot of hassle, because it would have probably been forcing some of the family to take her to the tax office and and all of that kind of things. And it could have been a big thing where it's just been a less than 3-minute call, basically.
Oh, I love that. It's kind of like I don't think we talk often enough about technology for good. We hear all the bad and the horrendous stories. I think sometimes they make the news, but that's an amazing story. There's something about, it's a phrase I used before, there's nothing more natural than a conversation. And that is the power of this technology. It allows someone who maybe has disabilities, maybe someone who is housebound, or for lots of reasons can't actually get to a physical location, to allow them to actually interact. Should we fear, Laetitia, AI and its creative power? Should we worry that it might become more creative than humans, or present a threat? Or as I said a moment ago, is that exaggerated? Or where is the actual answer? Is it somewhere in between the two?
Yeah, I guess the answer is probably somewhere in between the two. I am very optimistic about our future and the future of AI. I personally think there's a lot of opportunities coming up, and they will be good for society. Obviously, it's really important to have the right guardrail, yeah? And I think some of those guardrails are being established, but they're not quite there yet, yeah? One of the example I always use, when people are asking me about, the kind of technology killing job or things like that, I used the car example. It took. Or I have another example on that I can tell you afterwards. But I used the car example. So before having roads and traffic control and signs and garage to fix the car and all of that, we had a few cars out there, in the middle of the horses, kind of trying to pass their way. It's just as obviously it did challenge, kind of going from one place from, at horseback or with your bicycle and all of that. But it created a whole environment on the back of that created a lot of job. When you look now, the automobile industry is huge. And, if you look at the beginning of the, 100 years ago, it was nothing. So, like, it will open doors and all realm of things that we can't even imagine yet. Yeah. In the same way, I use also a little picture. I don't have it now, but it's that little boy that has a big pool and knock at a window. And I'm asking very often, it's in black and white. And the little boy is probably 13 or 14. And I'm asking people, do you know what that little boy does? He's just knocking at a window. And people are like, no. And it's actually the alarm clock for the miners, to wake them up before we invented the alarm clock in the 1900s. So, like, who would imagine have somebody knock at the window to wake them up? So this is evolution. This is progress. I think, there's a lot of opportunity for all of us. Into reinventing a better world and a new society, which I think, by the way, is heavily biased at the moment. So there's a lot to do better, and this is going to be a tool in our toolbox to actually create that. Obviously, it's important that we have guardrail, because we know there's a number of bad actor, consciously or unconsciously sometimes, that can create challenges. Yeah.
I wonder if we will look back in 20 years' time at some of the things we're doing now are our stick at the window moments. So it'll be quite interesting. I suppose that leads me on to question. We can't avoid it, Laetitia, anymore. ChatGPT, it's everywhere at the moment. How do you read that or see that in the context of conversational AI for business?
Well, I think it is quite revolutionary, the type of technology and architecture that's coming through. I think this is the beginning of the rupture point. There's obviously a lot of startup now also looking at specific large language model and all of that kind of thing. So this is the beginning of a rupture point in the AI technology, which is going to blow our mind more. So when we think about cloud and data was something big, and we could use some more of the traditional AI, I think this is just the next wave. So it's going to accelerate even more this collaboration in between human and machine. Definitely. Obviously, at the moment, there's still, it's like the car moment. You have a few accidents before you kind of invent the traffic control. Well, it's going to be a little bit the same, as some of those things are opening up. Obviously, people are a little worried with the regulatory framework and the possibilities, but as soon as we get used and we control some of those topics, well, it'll be another one coming up. I think one thing is for sure is the pace of change is never been that fast, and that's exciting because I consider myself as an innovator, and I'm like, oh my god, this is normally you used to wait like for years for things to come up, or things to kind of make a change, practically at scale. But the pace of change and the pace of technology is really kind of going much faster than it's ever been, and I think there's no way back. I think we need to understand for all of us, how we're going to keep up with all of that, because that's mind-blowing.
It's kind of scary. There's a old English phrase, you wait for a bus and then 2 turn up. With the pace of technology, it's you wait for a bus and then 19 turn up. It is kind of exciting and scary, the art of the possible. We talked about 20 years time into the future. And we talk about now where the pace of change is a little bit crazy in some regards. Laetitia, if you were to go back 20 years and you were to talk to a young Laetitia or any other young woman going into business, stepping in on the very footstep of the very first AI in the world, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give to a younger you with a whole career ahead of you?
I think looking back, so when I started in the late 90s, it was fairly, I remember working for Anderson Consulting at the time. So that was my first job. I'm still there. But, we had to have blue suits with white shirt and heels, and we used to give octal to people. So we had a computer, but we was dialing for mail and blah blah blah. So and we did the whole .com right, so kind of created the first websites for the world, basically brands, yeah. And then obviously this kind of has moved on. So this is what happened, meaning the internet was just coming out 20 plus years ago, yeah. So I guess, and personally, I jumped in the technology element, albeit it was not really my deep calling. I'm coming from quite humble background, and I thought, well, actually, this is the future, so I should really double down on this. I wouldn't change that. I think I would give myself more compassion and optimism. Like more compassion and optimism. Embrace change all the time. I think that's what I would do.
Were you very hard on yourself then in your early career? Because it's funny looking back to the 90s. I started in 94, 95 with DOS, Windows 95, NT4, you name it. Novell was around at the time. And I don't regret a moment of all those different experiences. I don't want to relive them. I can't imagine going back to some of the tech, but it was an exciting time at the same time. Were you hard on yourself for a period of time?
Well, I think I'm always a bit hard on myself. I always want things to be happening now. I'm not very patient. I give myself a little bit of patience. Albeit, I think this is over that time. I don't need that any longer because things are moving much faster than they used to. Meaning, I guess, hard on yourself, to kind of really kind of get to the bottom of stuff and make things happen for real, not talk your way through, but really kind of go on the depths of some of those things. It's quite complicated, yeah. The reward is quite big, but it is quite intense. It's not like all of this is coming from hard work, I suppose, yeah. And I don't think it will stop.
Yeah, I suppose there's being hard on yourself, and then there's been driven. That very much sounds like driven. I think it's interesting today when we watch people coming into the IT industry who won't have the experiences that you and I have seen. A lot of this pace will be taken as a given and taken for granted. The complexity will be so abstracted. And I suppose there's nothing wrong with that, because nobody wants to get out an abacus to do long division anymore. And I think the very first cars, we don't want to pedal as hard as we do these days. But I sometimes wonder if there's a halfway house that if we do see underneath the surface, maybe then the data protection rules, the ethics and whatever else might be that little bit more understood. But it's an interesting journey, and we will see what's happening in the next 10, 15, 20 years if we're about. And maybe I'll be like that 85-year-old lady that we spoke about earlier on, talking to some robot or having some co-pilot do all the work for me so that I can sit back and relax. But let's see. That's the exciting bit. Laetitia, thank you so much indeed for today's interview. I appreciate that. I've learned a tremendous amount. I think we have, and I don't think you're describing yourself as this, but I will. I think we've a pioneer in the conversational AI industry. And it's just interesting to have heard your story over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years to see how the technology has changed and how it's improved and where it might be going as well. So thank you very much for sharing all that insight and sharing a little bit more about Laetitia from 20 years ago to today as well. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. And to bounce back on you at 85-year-old, I actually wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about a project that I'm running in the UK with UKRI, which is called Home Care, which is about conversational AI and older generation to really keep them connected with society and activities and things like that. And I think if some of the audience wants to go and check it up, it's a pretty amazing piece of work, which I think is going to change the way we grow old in the UK, at least.
And what was is there a web address?
There is a web address. I can share it with you. In the COVID time, we did things like food delivery and things like that. So it's pretty amazing.
Technology is good. I love hearing those stories.
Yes, social isolation. Really trying to help this particular element, because we're in a quite complicated world with mobility and generation being quite far away from each other. So growing old is actually a real topic now, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate, what society did to our generations.
I worry about digital exclusion. I just worry that technology is put in place and we actually create a technology divide in society. So it's fantastic to actually hear about technology bridging any gap and actually facilitating and enabling. I think we need more of those stories rather than the fear stories, or maybe a mixture of both. So we move at a pace, but we guard what's there as well to protect us, to protect everyone who's involved in using the technology, and to protect who's vulnerable in society as well. I like that balance.
Yeah, meaning I've done a lot of work in that space, so I can talk to you forever on this particular topic. Really passionate about it too. So,
Laetitia, thank you so much indeed for today's interview.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an amazing delight to kind of have all the souvenirs of my younger self all the way up to right now. It's always refreshing to kind of think about the journey and how things are moving.
It's nice to take a moment.